Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Tech in the Tent, brought to you by Arabnet and PITME, sponsored by PayPal. We want to welcome Demian today. Demian, thanks for making time. You have been around the valley and done a bunch of cool things. So tell us a little about who you are and what you've done and what are you up to these days?
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I enjoy your tent.
Yeah, thanks.
I've been a startup guy really since '93 when I woke up in the middle of the night, Sunday night, realized that I was working really hard to make money for other people. I think this is something I said to Pamela before. And maybe I should strike out and naively think I could do it myself. So actually my father and I started a company. He ended up kind of going separate ways. It was very, very positive end to that company. We raised venture capital in '95.
Wow.
And sold that company in '99, and it was a company called Convoy. But boy, that was a lot of lessons that first startup. You know, I thought coming out of the corporate world, I knew I'd build technology, so I could build a company built based on technology. And what I quickly learned was that I really didn't have the skills, and had to learn some lessons fast about building commercially viable products as opposed to, a product that works for a group of people on the third floor.
Yeah, that's funny.
So that was kind of a trial by fire, and since then it's been probably launched 4 companies.
Wow. So the exit or the acquisition was before the bust or
no,
during,
it was '99. So
yeah,
it was long before. It worked out really well for everybody. Investors made money, the founders made money.
Cool.
I paid off my student loans, bought a car, bought a house, and then lost the rest of the money by leaving it in the market.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, at least you got the student loan out of the way.
Exactly.
That one is. I'm telling you, for this next generation, I'm worried. That's a big thing.
It's a big thing.
Big thing. So we won't get into that. It's not really something we can solve anyway. But okay. So just really quickly. So you're super technical, right?
Yeah. I used to write a lot of code. I write less and less code now. Like I said, I used to write code, and now I write email.
Can you solve that problem for me? Because I type like this, and literally the biggest hurdle in my life has been email. It slowed me down more than anything else. And I get anxiety when I have 100 and something emails to answer, but I see that. And Adeo at Founder, so he was doing like 1,000 emails a day. It's insane.
I go to a meeting sometimes and start walking back to my desk, and I look at my computer from across the room and I go, oh no. How many emails have come in since I was in that meeting?
So let's think about this.
I've been very fond of the delete key.
Oh,
become extremely fond of it. If I don't actually have to reply, I delete it.
And people shouldn't take that personal.
No. And if I need to talk to somebody, I'm gonna pick up the phone and say, hey, looks like there's an issue.
So kind of old school. I'm like that too. So.
Yeah. I figure if you don't need to talk to somebody about it, it might not be that important.
Okay, so then as you go from writing more code to less code, does that mean you're more kind of a VP of engineering type where you're overseeing teams and products and less kind of in the cave, writing code?
Yeah, good question. So my second company, I took on the CEO role, and then it was all about financing and marketing and sales, and I had 2 fingers in engineering, just making sure not horrible decisions were being made, but I had to delegate that. I had to let it go, and not retreat to the familiar because I had to go figure out how to sell. I had to go figure out how to market. I had to figure out how to differentiate.
Was that
a huge lesson.
Was that difficult?
Yeah, I screwed it up for a while. But then I got some help, got some mentors, mentors that had been down that path. And I got to tell you that once I really started opening myself up to mentorship, I moved down the learning path much faster. And I think we were able to position that company well. It's now the company's called Innotas, and we're the leader in our space, which is IT governance in the cloud. So that was another example of learning by doing, maybe a little bit expensive.
School of Hard Knocks.
School of Hard Knocks.
And expensive.
And a little expensive. I probably would have been wise to get more mentoring sooner.
Okay, so. That's actually a good point because I see a lot of entrepreneurs who have this chip on their shoulder and who think they know everything, when in reality
that was me.
Yeah, and the reality is that I always say that there's always someone smarter than you, even maybe in the room, and the better you get at identifying who's better or smarter in the room, and the better you get at absorbing that and not being kind of egocentric and kind of a bull in a china cabinet. I think that the sooner you can learn that skill, build teams around you, the more successful you'll be. So
I think that's right.
tell us a little bit about, especially for someone who's technical and then having to jump to being CEO, the personality fit as far as, building these teams and empowering people.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that because, again, most people in the Middle East aren't super technical and they think they can sell ice and Eskimo, but they don't really understand, the technical aspects. And then here, what I've noticed is that the people who are kind of in the middle, who are these product guys who understand business, they're social, and yet they can oversee or have, like you said, two fingers in engineering. Those are the ones that do really well. So it's a learning curve.
It's a learning
Tell
curve.
us a little bit more about that because that's a really important point.
There's so many topics to cover. I will say that there are skills that you can translate from one to the other.
Sure.
Technical people can be very good at decomposing a problem and creating a methodical path to a solution. If you look at marketing, a lot of those kinds of skills really do cross over, but there are other skills you have to incorporate. You have to realize that in a sales situation, it's really about understanding individuals and people and human beings, and not about understanding a technical constraint or a scalability problem. It's realizing that organizations actually don't buy from you. People do.
People, yeah.
I never have sold anything to an organization, but I can tell you the names of my first 20 customers. So, and that was a lesson that had to be learned, that those methodical problem-solving skills can come across the bridge. Yeah. But the problems themselves are really different. They're much more about understanding human beings and what their motivations are and what problems they're facing, and making sure that you're in the surface of helping them solve their problems, as opposed to of course solving the computer problem that's right in front of you, which is your problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That was a big transition. And then once you really get a feel for that, it's very exciting. You get the same thrill of solving a technical problem, of solving an organizational problem by partnering up with your buyer and saying, let's go solve this problem together that you have. And then you do it, and they end up trusting you sometimes more than their own peers because you're that agent coming in to help them change the game. Yeah. And especially if you're doing something new.
That's cool. I'm not technical at all, but part of what got me started was I was 12 years old and I read Donald Trump's The Art of the Deal. And literally it's turned into my Twitter handle being chief deal maker. Like I love making deals. I don't know. And maybe it's partially the Middle Eastern mentality of kind of the bazaar, like let's make a deal, old school kind of way of doing business. But I love creating these opportunities that don't exist. And sometimes I think really crazy and really I lose some people. But literally sometimes people are like, how in God's name did you just come up with this concept or this idea? And sometimes it's too big, but I'm learning to rein it in a little bit. So,
well, not everything works.
Yeah, definitely. Most stuff doesn't work. Exactly.
But if you put
90%.
If you put more ideas on the table, you're gonna have more chances that
it's a numbers game. Yeah. Exactly. And so part of that though also has been something that's kind of related to this, is that me recognizing my strengths and weaknesses and then building this team around me. So
hugely important.
It's very important. So we want to talk a little bit about, you've dabbled in education and video and stuff that's similar to kind of what we're doing. So tell us a little about that chapter of your career and all the things you've done.
Yeah, that was a very interesting project. It's called the Teaching Channel, and it was a reconceptualization of a UK idea, which was Teachers TV, I believe it was called, and it was really about using video over the internet to provide concise, practical, tangible teaching tools to American teachers, but in a very fast, low-effort format. So typically today, you'd have a day of learning where you would have a substitute come in and you drive to another city and you sit in a conference room for an entire day. Sure. And maybe what the person talked about was useful and maybe it wasn't. And you'd get back in your car and you'd drive back and you'd teach the next day. Whereas this is really about the using that easy access of the internet to pick and choose the things that you want to solve, but not only getting the lesson from a skilled educator or a proven skilled teacher who we've identified as somebody who, but then the tools, they would contribute the tools. So it's not only the audio visual experience, but here are some templates and tools that you can put into practice. And I think that the idea of using audio visual tools over the internet for learning and practical learning is very powerful, and when people are hungry for lessons, teachers hungry for ways to do things better,
Totally.
hungry for ways to save time.
Mm-hmm.
It's particularly people that are time starved.
Yeah.
Right? If you're time starved and you can get a powerful, useful lesson in 5 minutes.
Yeah, we're trying to do them like 25 to 30, but it's supposed to also be a little bit entertaining and personable. One of the companies from founders to Udemy, I don't know if you're familiar with them, they have a platform for people to basically monetize lessons and videos and educational stuff, and so it's a pretty powerful tool, so I agree. So tell us a little bit, what are you up to nowadays? What do you got cooking?
Yes, I've been working on a project which is a little different. It's really inherited somebody else's vision, so I've come in to a product that was a joint venture between 2 companies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still coming out of the stealth mode, so I can't yet talk about the companies, but the doors are beginning to open, and it's a visual workspace.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a different model for people to collaborate on all kinds of visual projects. It might be architecture, it could be engineering, it could be large managing big data. But the sort of small screen document-based approach to things really falls down for certain problems. There are certain problems that require a lot of digital space to work with.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is really kind of smashing the small document-based world and trying to say there's really an unlimited amount of space that you can work with. And you can work with it from anywhere. And you can have people in different locations in different countries working in a large space at the same time. So it's a visual spatial solution tool. There are several markets we're targeting, but it's kind of nice because it's breaking a bunch of hard and fast rules, and
Cool.
and I hope we succeed.
Yeah, good luck. That sounds interesting, and love to see it.
Yeah,
love to be
it's neat.
alpha or beta user, because potentially, as you're talking, I thought this is something that we could use to collaborate with people in different countries and on these little projects that we're doing. So
yeah, it's a different approach.
Okay,
Yeah.
love to check it out when it is ready for
I'll share it with you.
viewing. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So we have this part of the show that we call Lesson Through Stories, and the idea is that you pick one of our funny topics here, and basically the idea is that you tell us a story about something that happened to you, and it's a personal touch to an experience, ideally that you haven't told publicly. And you mentioned that you haven't been out of the cave in a couple of years, so I'm sure you have a story for each one of these.
Artificial deadlines, top ramen diet.
Mm-hmm. I think, who cares about revenue? That one caught your eye earlier.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
please pick one that you think is funny.
I'm trying to think of one that isn't depressing. First firing, I have one of those that ended in tears, and the guy wouldn't leave my office.
Security.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take this best idea you passed on. I could talk about who cares about revenue, but that's more.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Quickly.
I'm going to take the best idea you passed on and kind of turn it sideways.
Sure.
I think it connects back to something you mentioned about 10 minutes ago. Being an engineer and thinking you had all the answers. I was in a meeting once, my first company, and we had realized that this first product we built had too many critical flaws. We were sort of facing the music at that point.
Sure.
And one of the people in the room was somebody that I didn't have the greatest amount of respect for. But I realized about halfway through the meeting that something they had said was actually the answer we were looking for.
Huh.
And so it really wasn't about the best idea I passed on. It was realizing I didn't necessarily have all the ideas. I was recognizing that my job was to create an atmosphere where the best ideas could come up, and that the team could actually pick the right one, and not necessarily have the loudest, most powerful person in the room be responsible for that idea. So that was a really important. I reflected on that for months. I realized that, and that ended up becoming the path of the company, which led to being sold and everybody making money. And it was.
Did you ever tell him or her?
I tried actually to reach out to the guy a couple times, and he didn't reply.
Really?
But yeah,
You didn't.
well, he'd kind of moved on.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Yeah, and.
That's funny.
There were some dead bodies in that process. So it was more like the best idea that was passed on to me, and my willingness to realize it wasn't my idea. It actually came from somebody I didn't really necessarily respect, but they had the right idea, and my sort of aha moment was it doesn't really matter where the idea comes from. What matters is, can you surface the right idea? Can you select it,
Mm-hmm.
and then get everybody to rally around it.
And put your ego aside.
And put your ego aside and
which
really
is a big thing in the
chase
Middle
effort.
East. You know, it's image and ego.
Very
and pride.
hard to do. And,
Yeah.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle with this, you know, because they've proven to themselves that they often do have the best idea and they can make things happen. So that was my best idea.
So Adeo
It was passed on to me.
Adeo used to tell people when they wanted to pitch an idea, he's like, look, I want to hear your idea, but most likely it sucks, you know? And, and so that's funny. That's a good example. So the other one was, who cares about revenue? Okay, so before you say that, I want to explain something to the audience and maybe just bring it up. You know, most companies that are big here, a lot of them, are not making money, right? They're making revenue, but, you know, some of the behemoths of the industry are not making money, right? So you're an entrepreneur that's pitching an investor as a vision and to see the vision. Mm-hmm. So they raise 10, 20, $50 million, and the community is valuable, the product, and the grand vision. In the Middle East, it's still very cut and dry. What's your revenue now? What is it going to be? And then it's just financials and very, not visionary, but very nuts and bolts as far as looking at numbers. So I'd love to hear, you know, your take on who cares about revenue.
Yeah. Well, it was sort of my nuance on that point is that there's two ways to look at it. One is you really have to be focused on sales and getting people to pay you for your product or service. Mm-hmm. And it's not enough to create a product you want to use. You really do. I mean, Facebook struggled with this for a long time. How do we actually make money? LinkedIn, all these guys have been like, how do we monetize all these users? So that's sort of the first level of the question. Yeah. But I think the second level of the question for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially ones that come from a non-business background, maybe a product manager or a technical person, is recognizing the distinction between revenue and cash. Because if you're building a business, you really can't make payroll with revenue. Revenue has to do with how you recognize it on your books, which may matter to a big company that might buy you. Can I recognize the revenue?
Sure.
But what really matters for quite a long time is cash. Yeah. And revenue tends to be a little bit more esoteric. You know, if I have to recognize this revenue over the next 3 years, but they're going to pay me in cash up front, there's a lot of things I can do to build the business. So in that case, what really mattered, that revenue kind of mattered, but probably what mattered more was the cash infusion and the fact that I don't have to spend all my time with investors now making sure I can make payroll. So one of the things I say to a lot of early stage folks is that investors care about revenue, but you care about cash. Because as you start to run out of cash, you start to run out of oxygen, and you start to run out of power, and people will make you pay.
Yeah, or it will be harder or more expensive to raise money.
Exactly. You run out of leverage.
What's this guy? I think it was Ford or someone big said, borrow money when you don't need it, because when you need it, nobody will give it to you. And I can tell you right now, like, I see people who, you know, run out of this oxygen, and then I see people who just raise money and they're meeting new investors. I'm like, you raising that around? He's like, no, I'm just planting seeds and I'm setting it up in case, you know. So,
smart.
It's really smart, and so that you know, I fully see it, and especially because I've been around a bunch of early stage companies, and cash is king, and revenue, you know, is important. But
I mean, when you're running a business, it really comes down to one of your first most important responsibilities is the ability to pay the bills. Yeah. And you know, I think a lot of times I didn't realize how much of a burden that would be. I thought, I'll be a CEO and I'll go build a company. This will be great. And like, well, that's a bag to carry.
Oh yeah.
You know, so I think the more you can give yourself time, the more runway you can create for yourself with cash, the better. And you're absolutely right. Another friend of mine said, when the plate with money is going around, take two.
Bring it on! Bring me the plate.
It's the same plate.
I want to see the plate. You know the plate.
If it's coming around, if somebody's making offers, take two.
Well,
because they might not come back around.
I have to say, in our culture in the Middle East, like if someone offers you anything, you have to take it. You can't even say no because it's actually rude. So
interesting.
Anyway, so last and final thing that we do here on the show is called Old Rules. So the idea is that you tell us something that is like one of your fundamental core values or rules that you live by, but then also one that you want people to abide by when they're dealing with you. So the way I explained it very simply, being German, be on time and be on time. Like those are my two big rules.
You know, I think one thing I see a lot, especially with teams that are trying to come together, is there are two communication-related issues. I think one is learning how to understand where they're coming from before you react, before you respond. Because I see a lot of people trying to communicate with each other, and they're failing because I never really understood what you were trying to say, and I just jumped in and started reacting, and to point A when you were making point X. So I think one of my rules is, make sure you know what I'm saying before you come to any kind of conclusion.
Sure.
And I put the same rule on myself.
Yeah.
And I think that communication it's so easy to start solving a problem that you don't even have, because you haven't really taken the time to communicate with each other, and you just take yourself down some path, and everybody's ego gets involved. But I think the other side to that is the next communication issue is, let's make sure we understand the problem we're solving before we figure out how to message it to the market. A lot of times teams are talking and like, well, how would I explain it to so-and-so? I'm like, well, let's worry about that later. Let's make sure you and I are actually effectively communicating. Let's not massage the language. Let's just be. So for me, I think, and I'm watching a new team come together right now. And a lot of the friction or misspent time is really just poor communication.
Poor communication. Yeah.
And I think that a lot of cycles are burned unnecessarily because people think I said Y when I said Z, or I think you said something that you didn't say. And I see myself do it as well. So I think those are rules I'm constantly working on, is getting that really effective communication, especially between the team that's making the decisions.
Yeah, and especially in the Middle East, it's very hierarchy, and people still struggle with communicating up and down and sideways. So that's actually a really, really important point that we always try to stress as far as being able to communicate with the team. And one of the pieces of advice I ever got was, as a CEO, you want people around you that can give you bad news and not be afraid of it.
It's almost exactly what I was going to say, is that if somebody may be trying to tell you something, but maybe their communication style isn't yours, but they have less power than you, but you need to hear what they're trying to tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it really is listening is almost more work than speaking.
Totally. Let's say that again.
Listening is almost more work than speaking.
It is. It is. I can tell you right now, I'm not very good at listening. I mean, I love listening when I want to listen, but it is work for me to really listen as far as having it come in, but then really absorbing it, and doing something with it in my mind, really constructively. So
I'm the same way.
Awesome. Okay, Demian, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks
we
for
have
the wonderful tea.
We have a little something for you. We don't have a marketing budget, so we have to have human billboards walking around with PITME t-shirts.
Excellent.
If you're working out, or
I'll wear it with pride.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for coming. Want to just thank you for your time, and good luck with the project. I'd love to check it out. It sounds
pretty
super
cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We're here at the end. Peace. Thanks to ArabNet, and thanks for our sponsor, PayPal. We'll see you next time.